What's going on, everybody? GamerSci back with another video. Now, as you can see, I had a little delivery this weekend. Pre-ordered this a little while ago. This is the Capcom Home Arcade stick. Now, this was £199 and comes preloaded with 16 arcade original games. Unsurprisingly, all by a certain company called Capcom. Now, these are all CPS 1 and 2 games, CPS being the Capcom Play System. It is a standard of arcade jammer motherboard Capcom came up with. The CPS system would then take cartridges, quite similar to how a console would work. In fact, I have one right here. This is the Capcom CPS 2 motherboard and game. Game you can see is Street Fighter 03, Street Fighter Alpha 3 as we knew it here. Obviously 03 being the Japanese game. You can tell this is a Japanese board because of the green colour. They were colour coded around the world. So you need the right colour board to match your motherboard. The motherboard being the big thing on the bottom there. See, it's attached to the top like that, with a whopping great fan at the back. And the front would connect via jammer edge. A little thing there for your kick harness to an arcade machine, allowing you to play Capcom games. And you move this green cartridge, replace it with a different one if you wanted to change to something else. Fantastic collector's piece, and you know, these Capcom CPS 2 games have aged very well over the years. Still have the fans who love the likes of Street Fighter, Street Fighter Alpha, X-Men vs Street Fighter, Alien vs Predator, etc. But they're not the cheapest things. They also come with what's referred to in the business as a suicide battery, where Capcom were nice enough to add a battery inside these games that, if it ran out, would wipe the memory from the game, and it's at that point buggered, which is nice of them, unless the battery is changed. And the idea was you would then have to send it back to Capcom and they would do that for you. Capcom no longer give you that service. There are some clever buggers out there now, though, who can revive these. It's what's called a Phoenix, which actually this one has been. So when this boots up, it will actually say Phoenix Edition when it's on screen, meaning that the battery has been removed and the code implanted somewhere else. I'm not a technical wizard, I couldn't tell you that bit. Anyway, I've got a few of these. I do love them, but you know, these, like I say, these are expensive, but they are the real deal. So Capcom has brought out something for the CPS fan amongst us, which was the stick we just looked at, which is this bad boy. So the design of the stick has split people, I think, a little bit. When I first saw it, I wasn't too sure. It's certainly different. It certainly stands out. I always thought they'd gone a bit far, especially with the buttons being yeah, part of the design. But to be honest, when you're playing it, you don't look at the buttons anyway, so you don't really, don't notice. And it is very striking. Lovely quality throughout. The build is, well, got like this very hard plastic covering over the logo. That should take a bit of abuse. The unit itself is plastic. It's kind of a funny feeling plastic, actually. It feels high quality. Again, it feels like it will take a kicking. There's very little else on it, other than these few things at the back. You've got your power button there, your HDMI out and power out. Power out just being, power in, just being micro USB there, and there's a USB extension port behind that little cover, which currently does nothing, but I suspect that's going to get used in the future. On the back we just have the Capcom logo, and embossed it does say Home Arcade. Embossed, whatever. So the only other thing on there are these. You'll see, now these are actually stickers that come in the box. They're not actually part of the design. I guess so you can choose whether or not to have those on there, or if you just want to leave it as the plain Capcom logo. I stuck them on there. There you are. That's it. The build of the thing is very good. Now, the star of the show is, of course, the controls. We have Sanwa joysticks and buttons. For those of you in the know will know these are the standard for arcade controls, especially things like Street Fighter. These are the standard controls that would come in a Street Fighter cabinet in Japan. If you've ever used anything like one of these, it's the same controls. This being the Mad Catz Tournament Edition stick. This was the high-end stick that came out for Street Fighter 4, obviously, and these have the same Sanwa parts. You always hear when somebody buys a replica machine or something like that, they will talk about switching out the parts to Sanwa. That's these. Some people prefer HAP, but when it comes to Japanese games, Sanwa being the standard. Now the price of this, as I said, isn't cheap. It's £199.99, so £200. It's currently only for sale in Europe, I think. I've not heard of it making its way to the States. And when you factor in the cost of a decent joystick, I mean, one like that was something like £150 itself at launch, purely because of the, say, the decent manufacturing parts used. I don't think it's too bad a price for this. Apparently this will work plugged into a PC at least, as a dual player joystick. And giving you 2 sets of Sanwa Arcade 6, yeah, I don't think that's that bad. I mean, I can't see how they could have made it a lot cheaper unless they cheaped out on some of these parts. Anyone who's used something like an Arcade 1-Up will know it's very possible to put some really crappy Sanwa copies into something, but on a game like Street Fighter 2, you're really going to notice. So, let's address the elephant in the room. What about one of these? Now, you will have seen these about. They're always advertised on the likes of Facebook. People have reviewed them all over YouTube. I've even seen the likes of Cash Converter selling these new each Christmas. And what's this? Well, this is what's referred to as the Pandora's Box. It is, to all intents and purposes, a Chinese version of what we just looked at, although this did come out first, to be fair. Now, what is a Pandora's Box? A Pandora's Box usually, well, when it first came out, would look something like this. A small cartridge-looking thing with a jammer edge connector on it. You would connect this up to an arcade machine in the same way you would the Capcom CPS system, and it would give you however many games. I think this one's got about 600 games on it or something, the Pandora 3. Yeah, it's essentially a little emulator running in a box. I believe it's a stripped-down version of MAME running on Linux, if I remember right. Obviously, it's non-official, it's non-licensed, it's made by bootleggers in China, but these have proved very popular over the years with people wanting to stick a ton of games into an arcade cabinet without having to mess around with a main PC. It's essentially plug and play and still leaves your cabinet able to accept real arcade jammer boards. So yeah, these used to be really common on the arcade scene a few years back. Don't see them quite so much now. Pandora's Box these days seems to always refer to these. Now what's in here essentially, if you open this up, would be the insides of that Pandora's Box cartridge, wired up with some kind of super gun type setup to wire it up to a plug and play into a TV. Now this is, see, it's got this Street Fighter graphic on it, which seems to be a really common one. They seem to either use that or a King of Fighters one on most of these that I've seen. It looks superficially very similar to the Capcom Home Arcade. You've got, now these are not Sanwa, these are Sanwa copies. They're not terrible. They're better than the likes of the copies you got in the Arcade 1-Up. These do actually work quite well. They're very clicky. Take note, Neo Geo. And yeah, the buttons are okay. They're a bit not quite as smooth as the Capcom ones, as the real ones. The build of the thing is actually very good. We've again got the clear. On this time we've got the clear plastic, but the image is actually this weird thing stuck to the top. Not quite sure what it's made of. But on the back we have a few more things. We've got DC input. Now this needs an actual power brick to run rather than just a USB. You've got HDMI out, VGA out, which is handy for monitors. You've got an audio out, again, which is nice with the volume thing here. It has its own speakers, so it will provide volume and audio just from itself. So if you want to VGA out into a screen, obviously VGA doesn't carry sound. The unit does have its own speakers. We've got settings, to access setting menus, and USB, which doesn't appear to do much. There is versions of this that will allow you to add more games. This is the Pandoras Box 9, I believe. It's the one that added 3D games, which all seem to be taken from the PlayStation 1. But yeah, it's really nice. The bottom is actually metal. The thing does open up via hinges. Just undo those screws and it will hinge open to allow you access to the insides. You can actually buy Pandoras Box and new and updated Pandoras Box insides and just fit them in. There's bootlegs of these that go by the name Pandora's Key, which I believe have a slightly different layout, so you couldn't just hoy them in. But Pandora's Box, yeah, you can swap them around. These generally, I've seen them retail from anywhere from like £80 up to like £200, and it doesn't seem to always go on whether or not you're getting a better one or not. It just seems to be what the seller thinks they can get away with. I paid £80 for this, brand new, delivered from eBay, and it's nice. So how do the two compare? As you can see, they are approximately the same size. I've not tried lining the joysticks up there, and they all seem to be in the same positions. The Pandora is a little bit heavier, as you'd expect with the metal base. That's not to say the Capcom one is light, it's not. It has a decent heft to it itself, which is what you want. You don't want it sliding all over the place. So, the best way to compare these is in the games. Now, the biggest difference is the Pandora has a lot more games. A lot more games. It has like something like 1,000 games on it, whereas the Capcom one only has 16. What you've got to remember though is the Capcom one is officially licensed. They can't just jam 1,000 games on there from all different companies and call it a day, like the scamps who made that did. Obviously this was made, like I say, in China by some less than upfront people who simply went out, got 1,000 MAME ROMs and dumped them onto the console, called it a day, stuck a front end on there. Not all of the games on this run perfectly. Every version of the Pandora I've ever seen has some games that just don't seem to work very well at all. Some that have some weird glitches. For example, Golden Axe on all of them has a really strange bug where every time you kill an enemy the sound jumps really loud. Various games like that, obviously. I haven't tried all 1,000. The Capcom one, the emulation is largely perfect, with one small gripe. I've heard a couple of YouTubers mention this, but every so often, it's not very often, but there'll be a moment where the sound completely drops. It often seems to be at the start of a game, or the start of a level. For a second, you won't get any sound, as if the emulation's catching up. Now, I'm sure that's something that's going to be patched out, but right now it doesn't. The one advantage this will have is this is receiving firmware updates. It does connect to Wi-Fi, so it is capable of receiving firmware updates, where obviously that is just shipped and done. When I plugged this in, it was on firmware 1.0 and didn't have the option for a 4:3 aspect ratio. However, once I updated the firmware to 1.3, really simply just by connecting to Wi-Fi and clicking update firmware, it updated to 1.3 and that option was then available. So I'm expecting another update soon, because that sound glitch is there. It doesn't happen all the time, it doesn't happen often. I think I've only seen it 2 or 3 times, but it definitely exists. I'm sure that Koch Media, the company who licensed and created this from Capcom, are aware of it, and I'm expecting a solution soon. But let's have a look at how the games compare to each other. Let's have a look at games that are on both systems, so we can compare the emulation and have a look at that. So here we have 1944 The Loop Master, and one of the later entries in the 1942 series. This is it running on the Capcom Home system. As you can see, I've got it running in its 4:3 natural aspect ratio. That's what most arcade fans would want. That's how it was originally produced. As you can see, it looks great. There's a displaying in 1080p, nice and clear visuals, sounds great, looks great. Really fun game too. And here we have the same game running on the Pandora 9. This is 1944, the Loop Master. Now I'm unable to run this in 4:3. The Pandora doesn't give that option, it forces it into a widescreen ratio. Again, it looks very nice. You can tell the difference between the 720p that this is running at and the 1080p of the other. You've got a much softer picture, I feel. But that's still very playable. Alright, here we are with Street Fighter 2 Turbo on the Capcom Home Arcade. One of the standout games obviously in the Capcom collection. Everybody knows Street Fighter 2. This is running absolutely spot on. Flawless, timeless game, great sound, great graphics. Would I have preferred a later one in the series? Maybe, but I suppose when it comes to Street Fighter 2, this is the final of the Street Fighter 2 games before it moved on to Super Street Fighter, so I kind of get why they included this. It's the one a lot of people remember most of all, probably because of the SNES. And now we have Street Fighter 2 Turbo on the Pandora, again obviously in widescreen. Now there's something not right here, you'll see it straight away. It's running a bit fast and a bit choppy. Now I went through it because the Pandora does include lots of hacks, things like that. I was wondering, is this one of the infamous hacks of Street Fighter 2 that plagued the arcades? It's not the Rainbow Edition or any of those. This is the version of Street Fighter 2 Turbo that the Pandora 9 has, and it's playable, but as you can see it's not running right. It's a little bit choppy and it is running too quickly. Right, onto a true standout of the CPS series. This is Giga Wing. This is a bullet hell shmup. Runs absolutely perfectly as the others. Great fun game. Has this fantastic mechanic where you can charge a shield to reflect the bullets back at your opponent, back at the bosses. See, there's a cooldown on that. If you time it great, you can take down huge enemies really quickly. You've got a bonus system with like a points multiplier. Absolutely great system. Great game, sorry. As far as I'm aware, only came out on the Dreamcast. So great to have this on here. Giga Wing, great game. Now, Giga Wing on the Pandora. It looks okay, it's still got that kind of softer feel to the resolution, obviously, and it's still projecting it into widescreen. But the main problem with Giga Wing on the Pandora is, as I mentioned before, there's a mechanic where you can create a shield to fire back at your enemy. To get the shield to work, you need to hold down the fire button. Now, holding down the fire button in any shmup on the Pandora activates auto fire. So whilst it makes auto fire really easy to do, it actually disables the ability to activate your shield in Giga Wing. Now, there may be a way around this, but I've not found it. So whilst it's still very, very playable, it actually disables one of the main game mechanics in Giga Wing. As a result, is inferior to the Capcom version. Now, here we are with one of the MVPs of this collection. One of the reasons for buying this. This is Alien vs Predator. Never before released for the home. One of the best scrolling beat-em-ups you'll ever find. I can remember putting many a 10 pence into this back in the arcades in the day. Since then I've played it a lot on Raspberry Pis, on main emulators. But it's great to have an official version of this. Why this never got a home release I can only assume was down to licensing issues. Great game, runs absolutely flawlessly. You'll play this beginning to end again and again. I can't recommend this game enough. And again, Alien vs Predator on the Pandora 9 runs fine. As all the other games do, it suffers from being forced into a widescreen aspect. It suffers from a little bit of a softer image and a little bit of screen tearing here and there. Still completely playable, just not quite as spot on as the official Pandora release. Still, though, play this game. So, as you can see, the emulation does seem to run a bit better via the Capcom stick. The fact it's running at 1080p certainly helps. The Pandora runs at 720 and has a little bit of a soft image to it. And as I've pointed out, not all the games on there are quite perfect. Do I recommend one over the other? Or do I recommend neither? Oddly, I kind of recommend them both. If you're a fan of Capcom, especially their CPS 1 and 2 games, then I think this is a great homage to them. It's a tribute to a great time in the arcades. There was 80s and 90s Capcom games, most recognizably the beat-em-ups and one-on-one fighters. Now, if you're a fan, I'm sure it's a no-brainer for you. You're going to want one of these anyway, especially with the nice components. Time will tell what kind of updates it gets, if it gets the ability to download more games, as some people are speculating. I'm not sure that's ever going to be a thing. But that USB port, I can't see that going unused forever. Sooner or later, I'm sure somebody is going to hack into this and give you the opportunity to run more games through it. We see it time and time again with any of these consoles. I'm sure it will happen. It's a great system. The Pandora is also a lot of fun. You know, you can usually find it cheaper than the Capcom stick. It isn't official, and the question is if that bothers you or not. It's essentially the same as comparing a SNES Mini to a Raspberry Pi full of games. There's more games on the Raspberry Pi, but the SNES Mini is an official product. If that bothers you, obviously go for the official one. If it doesn't, then there's nothing wrong with the Pandora. It does play most games very well indeed, and obviously gives you an absolute ton more than the official product. If you can, have both. I mean, this is great just as a collector's piece, where this is great just to chuck on and blast through some games, discover new games. There's a lot of games on there you won't have played before, and it's great fun for that. The Capcom is the more polished product. It has the better parts, it has the better visuals, it has the online connectivity. The online leaderboards on the Capcom are great fun. I'm currently 8th in the world in Street Fighter, which tells you that there's not that many people uploading scores yet. But it's a nice little thing to have online leaderboards. This doesn't save your scores at all. Capcom CPS games actually in the arcades didn't save scores. Some arcade games did, Capcom ones didn't. The scores would always be wiped when the console was reset. So it's up to you. You want just something cheap and cheerful, Pandora's Box. If you want something legitimate and high quality, Capcom. Don't forget, the Capcom stick is, to this time, the only legitimate way to play either Alien vs Predator or Pro Gear at home, unless you bought the actual CPS boards. Alien vs Predator and Pro Gear, two absolute amazing examples of games in their genre, have never had a home release before this stick. So even for that, it's probably worth it. Being Alien vs Predator especially is an absolute gem, and I'm surprised that they managed to get the license so easily. Anyway, what do you think? Are you going to get one of these? Have you got one of those? Will one of these replace one of those? How will one of those replace one of these? It's entirely up to you. I'm happy to have both. If you've got room, I can recommend both. But anyway, let me know. I'm Gamer Si. Keep it hard.